I'm a bit nervous. I'm going to use the mic stand here, but it's very awkward for me because I also dated both Jennifer and Tom. Sorry to your children. I'm also quite short, and I have a grocery list with me because my wife told me to pick up some milk, butter, and eggs on the way home. But I moved to the United States from the UK. Can everybody hear me?
A little louder.
There you go. I moved to the United States from the UK, and that's basically what I wanted to tell you about. Is first, when we moved from England to America, my mother is American, my father is British. We moved to a town in the north of New Jersey called Woodbridge. I was a small kid for my size, and I moved to a town in the north of New Jersey with a lot of, well, New Jersey stereotypes. It was very hard for me to fit in. And Woodbridge was next to a town named Rahway, which I don't know if you know the name Rahway, but Oz? Yeah, so that's where I moved to from England. So growing up in New Jersey after I moved here, I was very fond and would recollect and reminisce about how great life was in England. We lived in a small village outside of Manchester in the north of England. And in my recollection, it was the perfect childhood. I lived on a street. I'm apparently shorter than I thought. I lived on a street with a river directly across from our street and the end of row houses. Behind our house was some beautiful green rolling hills. Up the road on one side was a cricket club. Up the road on another side, if we took a maybe quarter-mile jog, was the footballers pub, which is where my father used to go for his nightly pint with his friends at the pub. When I moved to America, I was in 3 different schools in 3 years. It was very tough for me, and it kind of gets me here when I start thinking about it. And as bad as that was, when I was reminiscing about England, as I got older, I realized, looking at my notes here because I'm in high school, I realized that all those reminiscences I was having were what my mother was feeling for the United States. My England, as a kid, running through fields, playing with cows across the yard, and going up to help milk some cows, and all these farmy things were not the memories my mother had. This was England of the late 70s and early 80s. This was Thatcherism. This was the time of the Yorkshire Rippers, basically mining strikes, Manchester and industrialization. And my mother, as a woman in her mid-20s, raising 3 kids, felt very alone. And some of my memories of my mother at that time were her weeping on the stairs and me asking, can I help you? And as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, I couldn't help her, and she would let me know that. And I felt like I needed to help my mother, and it couldn't work. And then one night, I was at the end of our row house watching TV. My father was up at the footballers pub. My mother had just put my siblings aside, put them to bed, and I, as the eldest, was up late night watching Sherlock Holmes. I used to love the Sherlock Holmes movies. These aren't the Sherlock Holmes of, what's his name? Benedict Cumberbatch. So we got any Benedict Cumberbitches in here, you know? So these are the old school BBC ones. And I was watching, I remember The Hound of the Baskervilles. And my mother said, okay, Kasey, time to go to bed. And I said, oh, Mom, let me finish watching this. And she decided that, okay, well, I'll go up, take a shower, and when I get down, you're to bed. You know, I'm not a parent, but I'm sure this is a deal that many parents make. I'm going to do this bit, and then you're off to bed. So my mother goes upstairs, and I hear the shower turn on, and I'm feeling really happy, and I'm watching TV. Now, we're in our house. My mom's upstairs showering. I'm watching TV in a little alcove in our house. Imagine a T-shaped. So the TV room is in the bottom of the T. On one end is a huge picture glass window facing out towards the moors. On the other end is our front door. Out the front door is a little country lane and the river. So I'm watching TV, and this is on the BBC. At the time, we had BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three, and I think BBC Four. So we had 4 stations. and we had no remote control. It was the old. So I'm watching Hound of the Baskervilles, Sherlock Holmes, enjoying myself, and at my side I had at the time my best friend Charlie. Now Charlie was a little doll about this big, and if you can remember Chucky from the horror, kind of like Chucky. He had a hard plastic head and a lot of hair sticking out there. And we're watching Hound of the Baskervilles. I'm feeling a little nervous. Chucky's in my arm. And we're watching, and all of a sudden I hear this noise, a very low bass boom. Just, I don't know if it's just, I can't really describe it other than just a low boom, just like that. And at the time, I couldn't just mute the TV and listen for what it was. So I kept there listening, being distracted, boom, boom. And this bass noise got a little louder, boom. And then it became more frequent, boom, boom. So I grabbed Chucky up in my arm, and I started walking to the top of the T, so the crosswalk. I looked towards the front door, nothing there, and I still hear this boom, boom. And I don't know what's going on. So I slowly look up towards the kitchen, and there's our picture glass window facing out towards the dark moors. So it's pitch black out there, and I don't know if you've ever been in a bright room with black behind it. You can't see anything. It acts almost as a mirror. I'm looking out there, I can't tell what's going on, but I hear this boom. I just see the window, the reflection, just changing. Just moving towards me. Boom, boom. I'm getting a little nervous. I'm pulling Chucky towards me. And Charlie was actually its name. Chucky fits. So I'm pulling Charlie towards me. And I had this little nervous tick when I was a kid with Charlie when I got nervous, is I would turn towards Charlie and grab his hair in my teeth and just pull. So he had all these, looks like, you have any football fans? You know Wayne Rooney with his hair plugs? It looked like he had hair plugs. I would just grab and pull, grab and pull. So I'm getting nervous, grabbing and pulling. I'm looking, seeing this window, boom, bowing towards me. And I couldn't tell what was going on. So I screwed up all my courage and I started walking into the kitchen to take a look. Boom, boom. And slowly, as I squinted, I could see, as it bowed in towards me, I could see almost like a print and a smear. And I couldn't tell what it was. And I got closer. And I got closer. Boom, boom. And at one point, I could make out what looked like the bottom of a fist to me. Boom, with smears all over it. I got a little closer, and then a hand came up. And it was at about that time that I realized that the bowing and the smears were somebody trying to break into the window. The smears were actually blood being smeared all over the window. This is a country road in England. I was 7 or 8 years old, and I just see blood and this window, something trying to get me. At 7 or 8 years old, I couldn't figure out what this was. I thought, I'm watching the Hound of the Baskervilles. Charlie's next to me, slowly going bald, much like myself. And I'm just tearing hair out, tearing hair out. At that point, I realized that something was trying to get into the house to hunt me down and kill me and smear blood all over the place. This is my trauma, and you're laughing at me. So anyway, in an English accent, which I can't do anymore, I started yelling for not my mommy, but my mummy, which my wife does a good impersonation of me, yelling for my mom. Mom, 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 mom. She's in the shower, she can't hear me, and this window, boom, boom, and there's blood smearing, boom, and it's getting more and more violent. At the time, I didn't realize that that person trying to get into the house could see me. And he's boom, boom, and I'm yelling for my mom, 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 boom, boom. Finally, I hear my mother yelling, what's wrong, what's wrong? And I hear her scrambling a bit upstairs. And she came down, and as she came down, she pulled on one of these old, beat-up terry cloth robes that, I'm sure it looked nice when she bought it, but it didn't look too nice. It was old, red, terry cloth, beat up. She wrapped it around herself, and she did that thing that women do with the hair wrapped up in the... And she came down wondering, what am I yelling about? What am I yelling about? And as she came down the stairs, which were adjacent to the room that I was in, she turned down, and she could see the window, boom, boom, and didn't know what was going on. And I remember her moving through the kitchen and stopping at the time at our desk that we had in the next to the living room. And she reached into one of the drawers. And my mom in England, one of the things she did to occupy herself was to sew and knit. And she had a lot of the knitting needles and all the paraphernalia that you need for that, including a large pair of shears that she would use to cut fabric. And I remember her seeing that, grabbing those large shears and putting them in those deep terry cloth pockets. Meanwhile, boom, boom. I see my mother grab that scissor, and the way she grabbed it told me that something was wrong. And that caused me to reach over to Charlie. Charlie was losing more and more hair. She tucked those scissors into her pocket, and she started advancing towards that window. And as she advanced towards the window, I remember her grabbing me by my shoulder and just pushing me behind her. Now, this is my mother, who I remember when I was young, weeping on the stairs. She missed her family in New Jersey, missed her family in America, and was always homesick. And I thought I should be taking care of her, and I couldn't. And here she was grabbing it as this monster, boom, boom, was trying to get into the house. And she took me and pulled me right beside her, and then eventually behind her, with those scissors in her pocket. I remember her hand in the pocket. I couldn't see the grip, but I imagined that her knuckles were white inside her pocket, gripping those scissors. And she moved towards the window, and she leans closer. And the next thing I see her, she's motioning to this thing. Boom, boom, go around, go around. At the time, my mother was 25, raising 3 kids and going to nursing school in England. My father was up at the pub having a pint. Go around, go around. And in my head, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's trying to get us. What are you doing? Go around. So he left from the front window that was facing the moors to our side window, where there's a sliding glass door. And as this thing, I didn't know what it was at the time, it was just trying to get in and get us, boom. Came around to the sliding glass door. And there, in the sliding glass door, I had full view with the light on of what I thought at the time, as this was happening, was a monster. And as he came around, I realized it wasn't a monster, but a grown man. Now, reminiscing as an adult, I realized that grown man was probably an 18, 19-year-old kid. He had his scalp split, bleeding from the scalp. He couldn't use the one arm. He was pounding with the other hand. Still, the look of panic. I could recognize that 7 or 8 years old, trying to get into the house. As my mom's yelling at him, calm down, calm down. And as a nursing student, I'm anticipating this into her head, but I'm sure she's calculating what's going on here. What am I looking at? And to me, it was just scary. I don't know what was going on. All of a sudden, she goes and unlatches that door, and this man, covered in blood, comes into our home. Charlie was near completely bald at that time. Rip, rip. So this gentleman, I presume he's a gentleman, he's still around somewhere, came into our home, and my mother quickly closed the door behind him, locked it, and started talking to him. And as she was talking to him, she started cleaning him up. He started telling his story. So what had happened is, if you digress back to the beginning of my story, there was a cricket club up the road. He and a buddy were leaving a cricket club and had the misfortune of leaving that cricket club at the same time as a drunk man with a cricket bat. And words were exchanged, and this man with the cricket bat started wailing on these 2 friends, splitting open this one guy's scalp and breaking his collarbone and shoulder. And his friend was up the road. There's a row of 10 houses, so he's only maybe 50 yards away at the end of another house with the old English police phone boxes, the red boxes. Nice and steel. He had managed to get himself in there and barricade himself in there. And he had called the police. So as my mom picked up the phone, when she realized this man was not a threat, she picked up the phone and went to dial the numbers for the English equivalent of 911, which was 999 at the time. She went to call those numbers. And I remember thinking, as she dialed those, 999, almost as soon as she dialed that number, we could hear the police right in front of the house. I thought that was very quick. I realized later that the gentleman up the road that had barricaded himself in the phone box had called the police. The police went up there. Then an ambulance shortly showed up at our house with the police and took this young man away. Later on, we learned, 2 or 3 days later actually, when this young man's parents came, she told us the story of her son and his family leaving, and his buddy leaving the cricket club, what had happened, and what had happened to him. But with that, they brought a nice bouquet of flowers for my mother. And after they gave the bouquet of flowers to my mother, they showed up and gave me a teddy bear. And with the words from their son, "We're sorry we turned your Charlie bald," here's a here's a toy for Kasey. So I thought it was interesting growing up that I viewed my mother up until about that point as someone that needed to be taken care of. And I'm not a parent myself, but that night, my mother, who was maybe at the time, you know, she's lucky if she's 5 foot tall, she was 120 pounds. She took me behind her and was willing to put herself between me and what I thought was a monster. At the same time, this young man who I thought was a monster, my mother had the knowledge and the wisdom to recognize that this was somebody that needed help. And she let him into the house and opened up the house for him and brought him in and took care of him. And basically, I realized at that point, at a fairly early age, that people are not who you would first judge them to be or who they appear to be. People will surprise you, and I think it's we need to allow people to surprise us. They will surprise you, and let them. And that's my story. So thank you.